Since 2015, I've unintentionally built a legacy that occasionally sneaks up behind me, grabs my shoulder, and drags me back here to say what needs to be heard. But before we proceed, I have a message for every Zionist and Pahlavi apologist, whether Iranian or not, who feels entitled to disparage me, my subscribers, or the historical figures I've upheld over the past decade. I don't want you here. Take your bitterness elsewhere. Gather your unresolved issues and unsubscribe from my channel immediately. I don't want you or anyone from your echo chamber anywhere near my content. Lashing out at Imam Ali or Imam Hussein won't solve your problems. To my mature audience, regardless of ethnicity or faith, who view the world through a sharper lens and grasp the archetypical symbolism of Imam Hussein's stand at Karbala, stay. There is more to explore and more to understand. I'm here to reveal the brutal truth about Benjamin Netanyahu before I take another hiatus. Today, we will expose the oppressive nature of his philosophy, the manipulation of recent events to legitimize occupation, and the racist agenda that underpins his actions, all cloaked in the rhetoric of security and freedom. This isn't about defense. It never was. It's a calculated strategy of domination. Zionist defenders consistently invoke the attacks on October 7th to rationalize the brutal occupation, conveniently ignoring over a decade of systematic oppression against Palestinians. Netanyahu's government has used this event as an excuse to ramp up bombings and expand military presence, effectively criminalizing an entire population under the pretext of combating terrorism. The situation in Palestine mirrors the historical dynamics of Native American lands during the 19th century US westward expansion. In both cases, a single event is used as a pretext to intensify long-standing agendas of territorial control and suppression of an indigenous population. When George Armstrong Custer led his incursions into native territories under the oversight of Ulysses S. Grant's administration, it was often justified by skirmishes and raids the native groups carried out in response to repeated treaty violations and encroachment on their lands. Each raid or act of resistance by native tribes were presented to the American public as an unprovoked attack, justifying escalations that allowed the US government to seize more territory and intensify military control. The underlying motive of expansionism was hidden behind a narrative of protecting settlers and combating savagery, effectively criminalizing native communities who were resisting in response to an already ongoing campaign of systematic dispossession and violence. Similarly, the Israeli government's response to October 7th has served as a justification to intensify bombings, broaden military occupation, and enforce harsher restrictions on Palestinian communities. This invocation of a singular act as a rationale ignores the context of long-standing systematic oppression, evictions, restrictions, and attacks that Palestinians have endured. Just as in the 19th century, these actions are framed under the guise of national security and fighting terrorism, sidelining the broader history of disposition that drove the response in the first place. The net effect in both cases is to legitimize a cycle of violence that erodes the rights and freedoms of the original inhabitants, shifting the narrative to one of defense while aggressively expanding control over native lands. Netanyahu has orchestrated the systematic destruction of Gaza, bombing residential neighborhoods and cutting off food, water, and medical supplies to civilians. These actions fit into a pattern known as starvation warfare, a violation of international law and a recognized war crime. These attacks were an isolated incident. They were part of a strategy to crush any Palestinian resistance under the pretense of freedom. Netanyahu's administration frequently hides behind the claim that Hamas uses civilians as human shields, a trope intended to excuse the relentless assault on civilian areas. This justification doesn't hold up, as it's clear Israel's strikes target densely populated civilian zones, not Hamas combatants. By dismissing the deaths as collateral, Netanyahu continues his campaign of erasure with impunity. Despite claiming surgical precision in its strikes, Netanyahu's government has bombed hospitals, universities, and residential areas. Civilian casualties mount daily, exposing the lie of targeted strikes. The statistics tell the truth. This is not about neutralizing threats. It's about domination through terror and destruction, with the death toll as undeniable evidence. Under Netanyahu, Israel has formalized apartheid-like policies, solidifying second-class status for non-Jewish citizens and pushing through a Jewish state that marginalizes Arab Israelis. His Zionist agenda isn't about a homeland, it's a weaponized ideology used to systematically erase Palestinian identity and existence. The US continues to provide unwavering financial and military support to Israel, effectively enabling the escalation of violence in Gaza. By funding this effort with billions of dollars in military aid, the US helps sustain a campaign marked by disproportionate force, which has resulted in immense civilian suffering and devastation. This support is widely seen as blind allegiance, justified by political alliances and interests rather than a commitment to peace or human rights. The US is not merely an ally, but a complicit actor in a brutal campaign that disregards international laws meant to protect civilians during conflict. Benjamin Netanyahu isn't a leader seeking peace. He is a war criminal using every tool at his disposal to oppress and erase. His record speaks for itself, from human rights abuses to brutal land grabs. Benjamin seeks to be remembered as the conqueror of the Middle East, the one who established the Holy Land for his people. By weaving a biblical narrative and crafting a divine justification, he positions the Jewish people as the chosen tribe, asserting superiority over others. This mindset not only facilitates the ongoing oppression of marginalized communities, but also legitimizes his aspirations to create a powerful Israel that dominates historically significant territories. Yet, like many megalomaniacal tyrants before him, pride may ultimately lead to his downfall.